everyone, good afternoon. My name is Lucas Pinto. I am a research consultant at EVO International, and today I'm going to give you an overview of the cannabis industry in Europe. So here's the structure of the presentation. I'll start talking about the regulatory landscape in Europe, then I'll go through some of our estimations and some of the growth drivers behind them. Then I'll delve into the cannabis consumer, and lastly, we'll discuss some issues in the current post-decriminalization era. So just for those who are not familiar with Euromonitor, we are the largest market research and strategic insights company worldwide, with offices across all continents and with our headquarters in London. And here is our current offering on cannabis. So on the top, you can see the countries that we currently cover. In the middle, the data and information that we can provide. And we also have regional and global briefings on the cannabis industry. So I'll start talking about the fundamental basis of the cannabis industry, which is its regulation. And predicting legislative developments in the cannabis industry is quite a tricky task to do, especially in Europe, with each country having its own culture and its own peculiarity. However, what we can look at are some factors that might give indications on the policy developments that will happen in a country. So, for instance, we can look at the political scenario. So is the government in power in favor of cannabis? What's the view of the government, of the opposition? When are elections? What are the sizes of the different parties? The current legal frameworks and policies. So cannabis usage, is it more seen as a criminal issue or more as a health or social issue? The economy, some countries might see it as a source of tax revenue, whilst others might not. The media, what's the language used on the media on cannabis? How is it framed? What's the international influence of that country? So where is it based on? What's its size? So for instance, smaller countries like Luxembourg and Malta might be more willing to take risks, whereas other larger companies such as Germany and the US might be more cautious. Social factors, is it an aging population? Are there many immigrants? Views on equality and rights, so usually countries that have a more progressive view on some more delicate topics, such as abortion, gay marriage, are usually more likely to advance on cannabis policy reforms rather than more conservative countries, and the public opinion. And as I mentioned before, with Europe being a vast continent with many different countries, these differences also reflect on the regulatory status of cannabis. So here we are briefly looking at the regulatory status of CBD in Europe, with some countries having it regulated with few restrictions, others with more restrictions, others non-regulated. When we look at the adult use cannabis market, we see a more homogeneous status, as most of them have it illegal. But when we look at the medical cannabis market, we can see the differences more clearly, with some having it fully legal, others pharmaceutical only, and some discussing it, and others fully illegal. And if we look in more detail, we can see where some of these differences come from. Different countries have different requirements for production, distribution, conditions for prescription, who can prescribe it, whether is it insured or not, also the formats that are available and allowed. So now I'll just go through some of our estimations and some of the drivers behind them. So on the left, we can see some key figures. So as we know, most sales come from the illicit market, around 89% of value sales. In the legal market, we currently estimate it to have around 7.7 million users. And most users and most sales come from the CBD and other non-intoxicating cannabinoids category. But we do expect the share of CBD sales to account for less of the total sales of the market as the adult use and the medical cannabis markets expand. And here we already have estimations in 23 for adult use cannabis because we already worked on, we already considered the pilot programs that are happening in Switzerland and in the Netherlands, for instance. But what are some of these drivers behind it? Firstly, well, with the opening of the cannabis industry, companies from different industry will raise their attention to it, and companies from beverages, food, beauty, consumer health sector. So innovation is something that is going to be a big driver, but not innovating just for the sake of it, innovating with a purpose, knowing who your target is and knowing how to offer your consumer what they actually need. Furthermore, something that will also be very important are investments from major companies. And again, as the industry expands, companies from all different sectors will look at it. But particularly, tobacco companies are the ones who have shown a stronger appetite for cannabis investments so far. Here are a few examples. So they already have the required infrastructure to act in the market. They have the knowledge and expertise on how to wipe out an illicit market. So even though many people, being them consumers or regulators, might not have a positive view about these companies, they will probably play an important role on the development of the cannabis industry in Europe. So, summary of these the drivers, as I mentioned, robust and clear regulations, innovation driven by need states, investments from companies in different sectors, and the consumer's perception. And now we're going to delve into the last point. So something good about the cannabis industry in Europe is that the borders between the medical cannabis and the adult use cannabis are quite well defined, or at least regulators aim to do so. However, this doesn't mean that consumers might see it on the same way. So here is data from our Voice of Consumer Cannabis survey, and we asked respondents what are their main reasons for consuming cannabis. So we asked current users, also we asked what are the reasons that lead their peers to consume it, and also for those who are in countries in which cannabis is not legal, we asked them what would be the reason that would lead them to consume in case it would be legal. And interestingly, particularly when we look at the CBD and adult use markets, the main reason is roughly the same, with mood and relaxation being the main one. However, when we look at each country individually, we can see different responses. So in Czech Republic and Spain, for instance, pain relief was the main reason for CBD consumption. In France, the Netherlands, and Switzerland, sleep aid was the main reason, for instance. So that's why it's important to look at each country individually rather than Europe as a whole. When we asked them about the most consumed formats, and here we've broken down by frequency of consumption. So interestingly, so daily, weekly, and monthly users. So interestingly, the more frequently one consumes cannabis, more likely higher is the chance of them preferring smokable formats. Whereas the least frequently they consume, higher is the chance of them preferring non-smokable formats. So just this might open up opportunities for instance, vape companies and other players in the market. When we asked them about their preferred occasions, though, the preferred occasions was the same for users of the three categories, with relaxing at home being the main one. We also asked them what are their views on cannabis, on the legal status, asking if cannabis should be fully illicit, if it should be legal for medical use for all diseases, if for some diseases only. And in Europe, the country that had the strictest view on cannabis was France, with 14% of respondents saying that it should be fully illicit. And the ones with the most progressive view on cannabis were Poland and the Netherlands, with around 1/4 of respondents having said that cannabis should be legal for recreational use. And we also asked respondents when do they think that cannabis will be legal in their countries. And again, respondents in France and also here in Spain were the most pessimistic about it, with the highest share of those who said that they cannot foresee it ever being legalized in their country. Whereas respondents in Germany and Switzerland were the most optimistic one, with the highest share of those who said that it will, they expect it to happen within 12 months or between 1 and 3 years. So last part, I'll discuss some potential issues with the opening of the cannabis, some questions that are coming with the opening of the cannabis market. And when we think of the recent developments, the first consequences that we think of are, well, as the market opens, then there will be more cannabis-based products, then probably there will be a decrease on the illicit market, a stronger source of tax revenue, but there are other areas, less obvious areas, that we can consider and think about on what the potential impacts will be. So for instance, as the market expands, as mentioned before, companies from different industries will raise their attention, and with consumers being more knowledgeable about their health and knowing what they want, and also showing a stronger appetite for functional ingredients, there will probably be products combining different ingredients with cannabinoids, but not only functional ingredients, but also maybe harmful ingredients to one's health, such as alcohol and tobacco, for instance. So in this case, how would regulators see these products? Maybe they will want to fully assess the impact of such products on one's health before allowing something to be placed in a market. Maybe this will impact where a product can be consumed. For instance, would a beer with cannabinoids be able to be consumed at a bar, or would it be able to be consumed at a social club if there is one, or just at home? Furthermore, the services and payments industry is another one to think about. So, payment processing companies that might be more reluctant to provide services in countries where the legislation, the cannabis legislation, is not as clear or robust as it should be. And what would be the potential impact of it? Maybe consumers would have less payment options, or maybe this would open up opportunities for smaller payment processing companies who are more willing to take risks, for instance. And the insurance sector as well. So a common discussion, particularly in the medical cannabis industry, is that there is a kind of lack of consistency in some preparations, such as mainly flowers, and differently than other medicines, in which it's easier to obtain this consistency. So this maybe will be a hindrance and might make insurers reluctant to cover treatments, or the fact that cannabis can be consumed in different ways, different formats. Would some be insured? Would others not? And there are questions not only from patients and regulators, but also from doctors. But for instance, in the UK, where medical cannabis is mainly prescribed privately, many doctors are not fully aware on the arrangements and the processes they need to go through in order to cover costs for their patients. Also, the fact that treatments are quite expensive, it might be another obstacle. If we think about life insurance, in some cases, people might not feel comfortable to disclose that they are cannabis users. Would this change as the market opens up? And how would life insurers see them if they disclose that they are cannabis users? And if these users, for instance, consume cannabis from the illicit market, how would life insurers see them? Furthermore, in the last years, we've been seeing many companies, mainly tobacco companies, and also governments trying to set smoke-free targets and smoke-free goals, with some countries even aiming to achieve a smoke-free generations, and with cannabis being a predominantly smokable format, would this be an obstacle for its development? Or would this, in the other way, enhance the development of non-smokable formats? Maybe it's an opportunity for vape companies. Maybe there will be an emergence of cannabis-heated products, like heated tobacco, for instance, and so on. Something that has already been mentioned as well, especially with the news from Germany in the last weeks, is how would cannabis be tested on drivers, for instance. And in the US, there are even some cases, some companies that test their employees. How would that work? So probably THC would be the main cannabinoid being tested, but firstly, testing alcohol is easier than cannabinoids. Also, the fact that there are emerging cannabinoids which we don't know the effect on one's health, how would they be measured or would they not? And still on the emerging cannabinoids, how will regulators approach them? Some, we saw last year mainly, a certain boom of HHC-containing products. Some countries have already banned it, others are trying to regulate it. So what would be the approach with other cannabinoids that we might not be even fully aware of? And also, how will the view on cannabis change? So when we asked respondents, is there still a negative stigma on cannabis? Amongst European respondents, roughly around 1/3 of respondents, minimum, have said that there is still a negative stigma on cannabis in their countries. And as the market opens up and expands, how would this change? Would this negative stigma decrease? Or actually, because cannabis consumption will be more visible, will actually increase, more people will have more negative views on it. This is just food for thoughts. So the main key takeaways, clear regulations and legislations are the fundamental basis for the development of the industry. Consumers' perception and also are an important force driving the expansion of the market. And as the industry expands and evolves, of course there will be many opportunities, but there will also be challenges, and it's worth asking the questions and trying to get the answers sooner than later. Thank you for your attention. If anyone would like to have the deck, you can download it through this QR code. And if you have any question, I'm happy to answer anytime. Thank you.